Happy birthday to our nation's First Lady. Happy birthday to our nation's First Lady. Melania Trump turned 55 over the weekend while traveling with her devoted and loving husband on their way to attend the funeral of Pope Francis, who, as we all know, was a huge fan of the couple. Couldn't get enough of them because of how they embodied Catholic values. Attending the Pope's funeral was important to both Melania and Donald. For Melania, because she was raised Catholic, and for Donald, to make sure the pontiff was still dead. Melania's mother and sister are devout Catholics, as is Melania, who in her modeling career often posed wearing golden handcuffs and a red leather habit under the name Sister Squirt. You might recall during the first Trump administration, Melania met the Pope in 2017 on a trip to the Vatican, where he blessed her rosary beads. At least she told him they were rosary beads. Melania then asked the Pope if there were any job openings, adding, since she became Donald's wife, I might as well work for the Vatican since I've already taken the vow of celibacy. So, why does Melania remain married to Donald? Partly because, like many Catholics, Melania doesn't believe in divorce, but mostly because she doesn't want to be buried like Donald's first wife out on a New Jersey golf course next to Jimmy Hoffa in an unmarked grave after dying under mysterious circumstances. Yes, Ivana fell down a flight of steps. Of course she did. Elon Musk came to Washington promising to slash the federal budget by at least a third. So far, he's only been able to slash his net worth by that amount. Nevertheless, by some estimates, Musk still has more money than the bottom 53% of our entire United States population combined. If you were to add up everything the bottom 53% owned, it would still be worth less than Musk's holdings. Yet somehow Musk is 1,000 times as worthless a human being as our entire country combined. As the segregationists like to say, send them back to Africa. When Musk came to Washington 100 days ago, he said he found trillions in government waste, theft, and fraud. Turns out it was Trump's cabinet. Nobody is quite sure how many workers he ended up firing. There were roughly 3 million federal employees when Trump's reign of terror resumed in January. It is estimated that by the end of this year, Musk will have gotten rid of about 120,000 federal employees. Perhaps. The courts are still deciding all that. So there's been no major savings. In fact, Trump spent more in his first 100 days than Biden spent during a similar period a year ago. That's according to CBS News. Trump has spent $220 billion more during his first 100 days than what Joe Biden spent in the identical period a year ago. So, when it comes to court costs, buyouts, and being forced to pay overtime to federal employees working inside now understaffed federal agencies, turns out it would have been far cheaper firing just one government employee, Elon Musk. Obviously, this was never about government efficiency. This was about corporate efficiency, cutting costs for rich people by eliminating all the meddlesome government oversight and regulation that keep America safe from predatory billionaires who want all of it, no matter how many laws and people they break. Elon Musk spent $300 million getting Trump elected, and the return on that investment was to guarantee more government contracts for SpaceX and Starlink while keeping the government's prying eyes off Tesla, Neuralink, and Twitter. Musk also owns Grok, which is making remarkable advances in artificial intelligence. Some of his closest employees have already gained access to our most private information. One whistleblower, Daniel Bareilles, now warning Doja employees might have taken 10 gigabytes of private information stored inside the National Labor Relations Board database and uploaded all of it to an offshore account, possibly inside Russia or possibly here inside the United States, where vast amounts of data illuminated by Grok, illuminated by Musk's AI, will be able to predict more efficiently market swings and threaten American citizens with information those American citizens would prefer remained private. Elon Musk got his hands on the keys to our government, and those hands have their fingers in every slice of the dystopian pie. He's big on self-driving cars, robots. Neuralink is all about planting chips inside your skull. It's all about artificial intelligence and, of course, rockets to Mars. He is a pioneer in transhumanism, the next step, so he thinks, in evolution, where those who survive become one with the machines, the singularity. These people don't just hate democracy, they hate people and themselves. They are characters out of every third-rate comic book we read as kids, but there they are. We know Musk claims to have 14 children, but recent reporting in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal now suggests the number is much, much higher and way more difficult to arrive at due to tightly sealed confidentiality agreements signed by the mothers. According to the Wall Street Journal, Musk refers to his children as his legion, referencing ancient Rome, where a legion meant thousands of soldiers. Nobody knows the precise numbers, but his spawn, having these children, it's rooted in eugenics, where he believes his superior genes must be matched with the right woman to produce a breed of animal, part human, part machine, part Musk. Indeed, this is the race science that began here in the United States, and it eventually spread to Nazi Germany, where it was kept alive after the war in South Africa, which instituted apartheid in 1948. Race science is why Elon Musk's grandfather moved to South Africa in the early 50s, specifically for the apartheid. He loved apartheid, wrote articles praising it. Musk's grandfather was kept out of the United States during World War II because of his Nazi sympathies, because of his anti-democratic beliefs rooted in race science. Donald Trump is also a big believer in race science. He constantly lets slip that destiny is determined by genes, and so is intelligence. On the campaign trail, he would often brag about his Uncle John, a professor at MIT. And in describing how smart Uncle John was, Trump would say, "That's how I know things, because it's all in the genes." He doesn't have to read. The intelligence is handed down through the genes. He believes this. We now have the President of the United States teamed up with Elon Musk, two men with untreated narcissistic personality disorders, completely controlled by their id. Again, this is bad science fiction, but it's not science fiction. It's more like a case study from the American Journal of Psychiatry on what happens after an untreated, highly functioning paranoid schizophrenic self-medicates by using copious amounts of cash and ketamine, in Elon Musk's case, Diet Coke in Donald Trump's. That's really what's going on here. New reports in the Los Angeles Times revealing that Elon Musk and or his companies, right before Trump's January inauguration, were on the hook for $2.3 billion in federal fines for violating a host of laws and regulations involving safety and workplace violations. According to the Los Angeles Times, Connecticut Democrat Senator Richard Blumenthal, the ranking member on the Senate's Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, recently spearheaded an investigation into Elon Musk's conflicts of interest, as well as his financial incentives to fire regulators, all done as purportedly the leader of Doge. The Los Angeles Times read through a 43-page memo prepared by Senator Blumenthal, revealing that On the day Trump was sworn back into office, 11 separate federal agencies had taken or were about to take 65 actions against Elon Musk. And those actions would have amounted to $2.3 billion in fines and penalties. Within 100 days of the Trump administration, all those investigations and fines seemed to have miraculously disappeared. You might remember one of the very first things Pam Bondi did as our new Attorney General was turn our Justice Department into Tesla security guards by charging 3 separate people with domestic terrorism after they were arrested for destroying Tesla property. But that individual who set fire to Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's official residence, according to Pam Bondi, that was not an act of domestic terrorism. Trying to kill a governor and his family, well, that's just an ordinary crime. But setting fire to a Tesla charging station, you're Osama bin Laden. But the real assistant Musk is probably looking for from Pam Bondi is the Justice Department's ongoing criminal investigation into allegations that Tesla destroyed and manipulated crash data involving their self-driving cars. This started under the Biden administration. Now, according to Senator Blumenthal's report, before Trump returned to the Oval Office, the Justice Department was preparing to fine Elon Musk $1.2 billion for hiding information that revealed how deadly Tesla's autopilot actually is. That investigation, much like Tesla sales and Elon Musk's shriveled joystick, all seem to have spluttered out. The LA Times reports rampant racism at Tesla's Fremont, California factory, repeated verbal assaults on black employees. All of that resulted in the Biden administration's Equal Employment Opportunity Commission suing Tesla for $462 million. But now, according to the Los Angeles Times, one of Trump's first acts back inside the Oval Office was firing the 2 Democrats who sit on top of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, as well as that commission's top attorney. I should mention that in 2021, Musk announced Tesla would be moving Tesla's headquarters out of California to Texas, telling Tesla shareholders that California's blue state regulatory agencies were throttling back innovation. Like California's Office of Workplace Safety looking into the mysterious electrocution of a Tesla factory worker, or the countless fines for failing to report hundreds of workplace injuries, or Tesla's factory in Fremont, California, fined for constantly violating COVID protocols while continuing to ignore workplace heat protection rules. That's just to name only a few of the fines California leveled against Tesla, amounting to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yes, Musk moved his headquarters to Texas because California was throttling back innovation. And by innovation, he meant finding new ways to abuse your employees. Perhaps when Musk was complaining about California, he was talking about the California Civil Rights Department's current lawsuit charging Musk with creating a workplace hostile to black employees, a factory fraught with racial slurs, intimidation, and job discrimination. Yes, you can take the man out of South Africa, but you can't take the South Africa out of the man. Or maybe it's those intrusive California courts allowing a class action suit to be filed by thousands of black Tesla employees charging Musk with rampant racial abuse and discrimination. Or the California jury that awarded $137 million to Owen Diaz, a black Tesla factory worker who sued over the mind-numbing racial abuse that took place on the factory floor. He settled last year for $3.2 million. Or maybe innovation was being throttled back by California factory employee Raina Pierce, a black woman who recently settled with Musk for an undisclosed amount after she sued Tesla for racial and gender discrimination and abuse. Did I mention Musk's grandfather was not allowed into the United States during World War II because of his Nazi sympathies? And after World War II, he moved to South Africa specifically for the apartheid and often wrote columns for Canadian newspapers singing the praises of apartheid. Well, Musk relocated to business-friendly Texas, where nobody seems to care about the 76,000 metric tons of cancer-causing greenhouse gases spewed into the atmosphere after each launch. The Federal Aviation Authority fined SpaceX 3 times during the past 2 years. It amounted to $600,000, charging Musk with violating air safety regulations during those launches. Musk responded by demanding Federal Aviation Administration Chief Michael Whitaker resign. So it should come as no surprise that on Trump's very first day in office, Whitaker resigned. The Los Angeles Times reports that Senator Blumenthal's memo says, quote, President Trump could not have chosen a person more prone to conflicts of interest than Elon Musk. The memo from Senator Blumenthal urges Trump to, quote, take coordinated action to address Elon Musk's threat to the integrity of federal governance, unquote. A little late, I think. You might remember I did some research in late January attempting to figure out how much Musk actually made off the federal government he hates so much. I told you how Tesla was teetering on bankruptcy after the financial crisis, and it only survived because of Obama-era federal green energy loans. Then I try to estimate how much Tesla and SpaceX were making from the federal government. I said tens of billions of dollars in federal contracts, but now the Los Angeles Times is providing an exact figure. They put it at $38 billion in federal contracts. Musk's entire fortune was either seeded by federal loans, tax subsidies, or lucrative government contracts. According to the Los Angeles Times, SpaceX right now is getting $10.1 billion in government contracts. Funny how you don't see any of those contracts getting slashed by the Department of Government Efficiency. Well, things are not going well for our alcoholic defense chief, Pete Hegseth, whose own mother put into writing that he is a serial abuser of women. You know, the fact that his own mother put that into writing is probably why Hegseth abuses women. I think he's got mommy issues. Trump, flying home from the Vatican, told reporters, I think Hegseth is going to get it together. Trump said he's instructed his staff, however, to, quote, maybe don't use Signal. But there are reports Hegseth is still very much on Signal, with both his cell phone and his office computer at the Pentagon using what Pentagon intelligence refers to as dirty lines. Trump openly acknowledging it's not going well for his defense chief, but that he expects Hegseth to find his sea legs. Perhaps. In an interview last night on ABC News, he refused to say whether or not he was going to fire Hegseth. In an interview with Atlantic Monthly, Jeffrey Goldberg, who was included in that Signal chat, conducted the interview. Trump admits, I needed to have a talk with Pete. Susie Wiles is Trump's White House chief of staff, and there are now reports that much of her free time these days, as well as J.D. Vance's, is spent finding Hegseth's replacement. And those are going to be some tiny cement shoes to fill. How about Ben Affleck? He's camera ready, just like Pete Hegseth, and reportedly has a serious drinking problem. Or maybe it's a gambling problem. Why not have a defense secretary who bets on Houthi airstrikes? Or maybe Mike Johnson's chief of staff, Hayden Haynes. He'd be a good replacement for Hegseth. Mike Johnson's chief of staff, Hayden Haynes, who crashed his car and was arrested for drunk driving in Washington, D.C. right after Trump, on March 4th, delivered a speech before Congress. He sounds like he could replace Hegseth. It was rumored that Iowa Republican Senator Joni Ernst, who served in the military and herself is a victim of sexual abuse. I don't know if she dated Pete Hegseth, though. She is a victim of sexual abuse, and she almost didn't vote for Hegseth. She decided to confirm him, some say, hoping he would flame out, so she would be chosen as his replacement. That might happen. The governor of Iowa is a Republican, which means Joni Ernst would be replaced by a Republican senator, and more importantly, she would fly through the confirmation hearings just like Marco Rubio did for Secretary of State, because the Senate is kind to its own. So how bad is it for Pete Hegseth? Pretty bad. It's generally believed he's a knockdown, drag-out alcoholic. And the problem for Pete Hegseth, if he is in fact an alcoholic, the only solution to alcoholism really is surrendering to a higher power, which he has already done. It doesn't seem to be working. Hegseth is a white Christian nationalist, and he's been that for at least a decade. He's turned himself over to Jesus. He surrendered to a higher power, and from what I hear, he can't stop drinking. So, Pete, maybe Jesus isn't for everyone. I don't know. Doesn't seem to be working for you. I don't know. You turned your life over to Jesus. You're drinking, spreading classified secrets on Signal chats, cheating on your wives, being accused of sexual assault, being accused of sexual harassment. You're spreading lies, and even your own mother puts into writing that you abuse women. Have you tried atheism, Pete? Maybe that would cure everything. So I don't see how he stays inside the Pentagon. From what I'm hearing, the problem isn't the bad press. Trump could care less. Hegseth, however, has become a serious liability for Trump because Hegseth is unqualified for the job. And again, that isn't a deal killer for Trump. In fact, for Trump, that's a net positive. But it's Trump loyalists inside the Pentagon. Trump loyalists who want Trump to succeed. They are quietly warning Trump that hardcore soldiers who support Trump's agenda, hardcore MAGA Republicans inside the Pentagon, are expressing serious concerns about Hegseth's carelessness, about how he treats classified documents, how he treats people working underneath him. They're worried about his temper, his chaotic management style that focuses more on loyalty to him than it does loyalty to Donald Trump. That's going to be a problem. There are reports that Hegseth's obsession over leaks is Nixonian and borderline pathological. So, this is a problem for Trump because he's a fascist, and fascists need their military. Not necessarily they don't need a happy military. They need a military that has a sense of purpose. And what's happening right now, from what I'm being told, Hegseth is, well, how should I put this? Back in Vietnam, they called it getting fragged. When Vietnam turned into a meat grinder and the soldiers came to realize this war was unwinnable based on a lie, and nevertheless they were still expected to give up their lives and or limbs to burnish the reputations of politicians at home, well, they silently agreed not to put up with well-educated, superior officers with a sense of superiority wanting to burnish their reputations on the battlefield by sacrificing inferior officers as cannon fodder. So, often in Vietnam, when an ambitious, fresh-faced higher-up arrived straight out of officer training school, looking to make a name for himself at the expense of a few soldiers, well, those officers would often get fragged. They would decide there's a village crawling with Viet Cong and it must be subdued. And his soldiers would say, okay, boss, you lead the way. And, well, let's just say the officer, schooled in military science, ended up the victim of not-so-friendly fire. That would be fragging. He got fragged. Sometimes in Vietnam, they burnt a village to save it. Sometimes they had to frag a lieutenant to save a platoon. War is an ugly business, and what we've got going on right now inside the Pentagon is Pete Hegseth getting gang fragged. This is a gang fragging. Now, most of you are too young to remember swift boating. That's different from fragging. Chris LaCivita, Trump's campaign manager, invented swift boating back in 2004 to help George W. Bush defeat Democratic candidate John Kerry. Now, Kerry received, George W. Bush was running for re-election. He led us into a war, and it turns out he was a draft-dodging alcoholic during Vietnam and was AWOL from the Air National Guard Champagne Unit. Okay, this was a big political problem, and John Kerry was running against George W. Bush, and he had a stellar record in Vietnam. He received several medals, including three Purple Hearts as a lieutenant in charge of swift boats. Well, Karl Rove, Trump's campaign manager, his rule is find your opposition's strength, not his weakness. Find their strength and go for it. Lie about it. It's evil, but it's brilliant. If you want to take down your opponent, it's amateur hour to isolate your opponent's weakness. According to Karl Rove, find your opponent's strength and weaken that. And Kerry's strength was his war record. So when Kerry ran against Bush in 2004, some of the guys he served with came after him, insisting Kerry's Silver Star, his Bronze Star, even his Purple Hearts were undeserved. And they said that Kerry's service in Vietnam was just about resume building. And that's what swift boating means. And they succeeded. George W. Bush won. And there's a sense right now that Hegseth is getting swift-boated, actually showboated. I think we would call this getting showboated. He's a showboater. I think his fellow soldiers within the Pentagon see him the same way some of John Kerry's fellow soldiers saw him. Not one of us. Hegseth went to Princeton. Kerry went to Yale. Hegseth is a TV personality, more comfortable with his makeup brush than he is an M16. So Hegseth has created his own war zone inside the Pentagon. He fired 3 of his closest aides, accusing them of leaking. Based on conjecture, he's reportedly created a culture of paranoia inside the Pentagon. Now, that is a leadership style that can work, just not inside the Pentagon. It's how Trump governs, and that's how Hegseth's old boss at Fox News, Roger Ailes, ran the network. Keep everyone off balance, fearful, uncertain about their job security. But you can't do that inside our Pentagon. Colin Carroll is a combat veteran deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. He served as a ground intelligence officer for the Marines, and then he served as Deputy Secretary of Defense Steve Feinberg's chief of staff inside the Pentagon, but was fired earlier this month after Pete Hegseth accused him of leaking information about Hegseth to the media. It was based on no evidence. Hegseth is throwing bodies out the window based on a feeling. Carroll is giving interviews where he says Hegseth, as our nation's defense chief, is skilled only in appealing to Republican politicians and right-wing journalists who visit him inside the Pentagon. He can be charming and a terrific salesman when he's with those people. But when it comes to dealing with his soldiers inside the Pentagon, the people whose job it is to make certain gears inside our nation's military machine click into place, Hegseth, well, he's in way over his head. He lacks leadership skills. And all you had to do was look at his tenure as head of that nonprofit for veterans. From his sexual harassment, his heavy drinking, and financial irregularities, it was clear Hegseth, while good on camera, has zero leadership skills. Zero. Carroll says Hegseth is easily agitated these days, and he suggested Hegseth models behavior that's obsessively paranoid, especially when it comes to the leaking. Carroll said Hegseth spends half his workday inside the Pentagon trying to figure out who's against him. He has a bunker-like circle of advisors right now made up of his wife, his two brothers, and his personal attorney. There have been other reports of Hegseth screaming at top generals, hurling expletives at them, threatening, quote, "I'll strap you to an effing lie detector. Are you leaking?" This is how he's talking to generals. Asked if Hegseth was okay, as in how is his mental health, Carroll told Sirius Radio, quote, "Honestly, I don't know," which means I think he's crazy. Again, there is the issue of drinking. Hegseth promised he would quit if he were confirmed. Well, we know there are countless reports of Hegseth being a blackout drunk. During his confirmation hearings, people who worked with him over at Fox News told the media Hegseth often went on the air drunk. It would be first thing in the morning. Fox and Friends, first thing in the morning. It was not unusual to see Hegseth completely plastered before noon. There are countless reports of Pete Hegseth drinking himself into semi-consciousness inside strip clubs and bars while running that nonprofit for veterans, which he was pretty much fired from. And then there is his refusal to obey Pentagon protocols when it comes to classified material. More and more reports coming out about Hegseth transmitting classified war plans on unsecured lines. This, as you all know, came to light immediately following the March 15th airstrike in Yemen, where Mike Waltz, Trump's national security advisor, set up the infamous Signal group chat that included all White House principals and, for some reason, accidentally, Jeffrey Goldberg, a reporter from Atlantic Magazine. Everyone before that Signal group chat had been warned, do not go on Signal and don't discuss classified attack plans on Signal. But they went ahead anyway, and Hegseth exacerbated the situation by providing that chat, as well as a separate Signal chat with his wife, two brothers, and his personal attorney, with real-time updates on the coordinates of these impending airstrikes, as well as their time. And this is what's known as Signalgate. Immediately after the Signalgate story broke on March 26th, the strikes were on March 15th. By March 26th, Signalgate was now a story, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe, who was included in that Signal group chat, was testifying before Congress under oath. And it was there that House Democrat Jimmy Gomez asked whether Pete Hegseth is still drinking. During that same House Intelligence Committee hearing and later during a press conference, House Democrat Seth Moulton said he wanted to know if Hegseth was just incompetent or whether he was drunk. CIA Director Ratcliffe clutched his pearls and said, "How dare you?" And CIA Director Ratcliffe attempted to seize the moral high ground by asking, why are you focusing on Pete Hegseth posting classified war plans on an unsecure Signal group chat? Why aren't you focusing on how successful those airstrikes in Yemen against the Houthis turned out to be? And I agree. We should be talking about those airstrikes in Yemen. Tuesday, Trump spoke at Selfridge Air National Guard Base in Michigan and was joined by his Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth. And Trump said to the crowd, "Pete's doing a really great job. The Houthis in Yemen will tell you that." That was supposed to be a joke about how, thanks to Pete Hegseth, the Houthis in Yemen are really taking a pounding. Well, are they? Are they taking a pounding? How many innocent civilians have been killed? Are these airstrikes successful? J.D. Vance advised against them. He said airstrikes won't be enough and might make things worse. He said American engagement in Yemen would cause a severe spike in oil prices and said it isn't worth it since only 3% of the ships passing through the Suez Canal are American. He said Europe, not America, should be fighting in Yemen. Europe should be securing that region since 40% of European trade goes through the Suez Canal. He said he was sick of bailing Europe out, and Hegseth agreed in the group chat. He called Europe a bunch of freeloaders, but our defense chief in the group chat said, "I'm still for the airstrikes." And so, are these airstrikes the success Trump and his White House insist they are? The Economist reported this week that Trump has been bombarding the Houthis in Yemen with airstrikes every single day since he began the air campaign on March 15th. The problem, as I keep telling you, is wars are never won from the air, which is why the airstrikes haven't stopped the Houthis from continuing to fire ballistic missiles on Israel. In fact, last week, for the first time, the Houthis reached northern Israel. We're hitting the Houthis, and they're hitting Israel harder and deeper, which is what Elon Musk hears when he's with a woman and then gives up, which is why he relies on artificial insemination, allegedly. Attacks on U.S. ships in the Red Sea by Houthis continue. On Monday, a U.S. Navy Super Hornet fighter jet lost at sea as it was being towed into place aboard the USS Harry S. Truman. Our military was reportedly avoiding a Houthi missile when the tow truck slipped off the hangar deck, dragging this jet fighter into the sea. Luckily, nobody was injured. The Associated Press reporting Houthi fighters in the past few weeks took out 7 U.S. Reaper drones that cost about $200 million in total. So far, no U.S. lives have been lost. And U.S. Central Command says since the air campaign began in mid-March, the number of attacks against U.S. ships in the Red Sea is down by about 60%. But given what we're sending our way to Yemen, there should be zero. But like I keep trying to remind you, wars are never won from the air. This air campaign over Yemen is coming up on 6 weeks. Israel getting hit every day, harder and deeper, Elon. No, Israel is getting hit every day, harder and deeper. And the Houthis are still firing at our ships. They're firing at Israel, and they're firing at our ships. So here is the dirty, dark secret about military airstrikes. They not only kill civilians, they're supposed to kill civilians. Now, we are killing civilians in Yemen. The Pentagon, Israel, and Russia, they won't admit this, but airstrikes are acts of terrorism, and that's all they are. Like I said, wars can never be won from the air. You need to put soldiers, boots on the ground. You all witnessed shock and awe at the beginning of our invasion of Iraq back in 2003. At least some of you did. Remember shock and awe? Remember the former generals now working as lobbyists for Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, how they'd go on all the network news shows during shock and awe and say, you know, this might be enough. I wouldn't be surprised if these smart bombs with their pinpoint accuracy kill Saddam Hussein. Well, those smart bombs with their pinpoint accuracy didn't kill Saddam Hussein. It was still necessary to send troops into Iraq. See, the purpose of airstrikes is to commit acts of terror, and that means killing civilians, innocent women and children, so the people rise up against their own leaders, blaming them for the bombs getting dropped on them. That's the thinking about airstrikes. You kill enough innocent women and children, the people will rise up and topple the leader for us, so we don't have to send in troops. But we always have to send in troops because you cannot win a war from above. When you bomb Yemen, Kyiv, Gaza, or Beirut, the people on the ground whose children, wives, and husbands end up dead, they galvanize around their leadership. And they begin to believe the Houthis, Zelensky, Hamas, Hezbollah are right. Airstrikes don't work. They're not working in Kyiv, Beirut, Gaza, or Yemen. They didn't work in Baghdad. Terrorizing civilian populations makes them more loyal to their despotic leaders and less likely to topple them. Zelensky is not, by the way, a despotic leader, no matter what Donald Trump claims. So the Pentagon is keeping a lid on information regarding the Houthi airstrikes. Our Pentagon refuses to confirm or deny civilian deaths. Instead, we have a parade of one Trump official after another, bragging about the pinpoint accuracy of our air attacks in Yemen. But there's no such thing as pinpoint accuracy when it comes to airstrikes. More importantly, and I can't stress this enough, civilian casualties are the point. Okay? The reliance on missile attacks presupposes that we will do so much damage to civilians that the people will rise up. Inside the Pentagon, inside the Kremlin, inside Israel's war cabinet. They figure once we kill enough innocent civilians, the people will rise and topple their leadership for us, so we don't have to send in ground troops. That's the thinking about airstrikes. But the more civilians we kill, the more they hate us and the more they support their leadership that we're trying to depose. It's why fighting continues in Ukraine, Beirut, and Gaza. It's why we lost in Iraq. It's why we're not stopping the Houthis in Yemen. Might be something for the Department of Government Efficiency to look into. I mean, forget all the innocent civilians we're killing. This is not an efficient use of our military and their budget. It's something the Department of Government Efficiency should look into, or the International Criminal Court, because these are, in fact, war crimes. These are war crimes, which is why the United States, Russia, and Israel are not signatories to the Rome Statute that created the International Criminal Court. These are war crimes. It's why Benjamin Netanyahu and Putin couldn't go to the Pope's funeral, because it's called the Rome Statute. And police in Italy would be obligated to arrest Putin and Netanyahu. Immediately after America's first airstrike on the Houthis that took place on March 15th, House Democrat Maxwell Frost accused the Trump White House of celebrating war crimes. He cited J.D. Vance texting the word excellent, after National Security Advisor Michael Waltz updated the Signal group chat with information that our military collapsed a building where the girlfriend of a Houthi leader lived. It is believed 15 civilians died in that air attack, civilians. And later that day, 15 other civilians were reportedly killed after the Pentagon, not making this up, allegedly took out a cancer hospital, a new cancer hospital in Yemen. These are war crimes, using civilian structures as proving grounds for new weapons, which is really what this is about. That is a war crime. It's several war crimes. When you get into the commanding heights of the military-industrial complex, the rationale for using these weapons is to see if they actually work, and to then use these airstrikes to sell them, to sell the weapons to other countries. The airstrikes going on right now in Yemen are basically infomercials. So these bombs can be sold to Saudi Arabia, the EU, and South Korea. You know how Michael Jackson's head got burnt filming a Pepsi commercial and he was never the same again? That's what these airstrikes in Yemen are. They're a commercial for Raytheon directed by Bob Giraldi. It's just a big commercial to sell more weapons. That's all it is. As I said, these Houthi airstrikes are going on every day. The Pentagon admitting that as many as 800 airstrikes have taken place since March 15th. Your tax dollars hard at work accomplishing nothing. Nothing. The Houthis now accusing American missiles of striking a detention center in northwest Yemen over the weekend, killing 68 African migrants inside that detention center, injuring 50. Trump ordering an airstrike that killed 68 African migrants. How odd. That must have been a mistake. 74 people were killed on April 17th after U.S. airstrikes targeted Yemen's energy infrastructure along the Red Sea coast. So, how is this possible? How is this possible? We're America, a force for good in the world, right? How is it possible that Donald Trump can wage war on the Yemeni people without congressional approval? Well, as I told you on previous shows, he already has congressional approval. He got it back in 2001. The authorization for use of military force in the global war on terror was signed into law 7 days after 9/11. And since then, for the past 24 years, it's justified American presidents bombing 22 separate countries in our global war on terrorism. It's been done. It's been approved by Congress. In 2001, only one person, Congresswoman Barbara Lee of Oakland, California, voted against that war resolution. Everyone else in the House and Senate voted for it, but not Barbara Lee, who just left Congress and was elected mayor of Oakland, California on April 15th. She should have been elected to the Senate from California, but was defeated last year by Adam Schiff in the jungle primaries. I like Adam Schiff. He's no Barbara Lee. So, let's turn to the tariffs. How are we doing on time? Okay. Trump is a liar, and he claims the tariffs are a huge success. He says they're not inflationary. He says they're not a tax on consumers, and he's claiming that it's just a matter of time until people earning less than $200,000 a year won't even have to pay income taxes because my tariffs will pay them for you. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick literally talking about an external revenue service to replace our internal revenue service. And it sounds great. There's only one little problem. You have to be really stupid to believe this. You have to believe foreigners pay the tariffs, but they don't. But if you're stupid and you believe they do, then you can believe the government can be funded entirely by other countries simply through tariffs. We can get rid of the income tax because Trump's tariffs are paying for everything. But by charging other countries for the privilege of our buying their goods and services, that's going to pay for our entire federal government. Jamie Dupree has a great Substack. His name is Jamie Dupree, Dupree. He is a great writer. If you want to learn about the inner workings of Congress, the House and the Senate, and you want it clear, and you don't want anybody. He writes very clearly. His name is Jamie Dupree, Dupree. Read him on Substack. Support him. If you have any extra money, read Jamie Dupree and subscribe. Pay for him. Jamie Dupree, Dupree. He is a great writer. He will give you a class in civics. He's not arrogant. His writing isn't exclusionary. It's inclusive. He wants you to understand how Congress works. Jamie Dupree, Dupree. He's over at Substack. And he writes that the income tax, excluding corporate taxes, the income tax brings in about $2.7 trillion a year. So tariffs, according to Lutnick and Trump, we're going to get rid of income taxes. The tariffs will raise $2.7 trillion each year. The New Republic says so far, since Trump has returned to the Oval Office, his tariffs have raised $21 billion. So you need $2.7 trillion a year. So far, Trump's tariffs have raised $21 billion, which means by the end of this year, who knows, but if we're looking at about $100 billion, we need $2.7 trillion to replace the income tax. Jamie Dupree estimates maybe if Trump imposed an 80% tariff on everything across the board, crashing the world economy, of course, and our economy, then we could raise $2.7 trillion up until everyone lost their jobs and didn't have to pay any income taxes at all. I mean, if you're going to impose an 80% tariff on everything, the world economy collapses. But that's how Trump is going to end up eliminating the income tax, by eliminating income. That's the plan. By the way, read Jamie Dupree. The name sounds like a character from The Shawshank Redemption, doesn't it? Jamie Dupree. But read him. He's great. Thanks to the DOJA layoffs, a lot of tariffs now are going uncollected because customs officials are short-staffed. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, well, they collect the tariffs, but they've been kind of preoccupied lately throwing 4-year-old U.S. citizens suffering from metastatic lung cancer out of the country. It's more important to deport pregnant women and children suffering from stage 4 cancer who are American citizens. It's more important to do that than collect the tariffs that Trump has initiated. Amazon's website, oh man, I almost broke something today. Amazon's website began listing the cost of tariffs on each purchase because shoppers have a right to know why the price of, say, a car seat for your baby has gone up. You're told when you go to Amazon, which you shouldn't do, but you're told what the sales tax is and what the shipping costs are, and Amazon figured tell customers what these tariffs are costing. Explain why you're paying more. Well, Trump flipped out. He literally called Jeff Bezos. How dare you inform consumers of what the tariffs are costing them? I told voters China was paying the tariffs, not them. Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, publicly called Amazon's decision, quote, a hostile and political act designed to convince shoppers that Trump's tariffs are why they're starting to pay more for stuff. They are. And why would Trump's press spokeswoman want Americans to know the truth? Amazon wasn't calling these Trump's tariffs. Amazon was merely stating this is costing you more due to the added cost of tariffs. It's costing you $5 more because of the tariffs. That's all they were doing. But it's a hostile and political act, according to the Trump administration, for Amazon to simply say you're paying extra now because of the tariffs. After Trump's phone call, Jeff Bezos, who attended the Trump inauguration, he donated to it. He's paying Melania millions, I think it's like 30 million, 60 million, for a documentary on her life. And he's changed the Washington Post's editorial department, adding more conservative columnists. Well, after he got a call from Donald Trump, Jeff Bezos immediately backed down and decided customers should continue to believe China, not America, is paying the tariffs. So your baby seat's going to be more expensive, but Amazon won't tell you why. Why did he back down? Well, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin rocket company gets half its business from the federal government. Amazon gets billions a year from the federal government just from orders placed through its shopping portal. Amazon's cloud services receive billions each year from the Pentagon and the National Security Agency. All right, this is subtraction and addition. Get out your calculator, please. This is how you win elections, Democrats, okay? This is how you win elections. Expecting American citizens to be able to do subtraction and addition. The U.S. economy is $30 trillion a year. Our gross domestic product is $30 trillion a year. We produce $30 trillion in goods and services each year. The federal budget this year will be more than $7 trillion, okay? The federal budget, that's the federal government is, think of it as a customer. It spends $7 trillion a year. Our economy is $30 trillion a year. $7 trillion of that is what the federal government spends. That's 23.3% of our entire economy. 23.3% of our entire economy is what the federal government spends. 23.3% of our entire economy is what the federal government, what the federal budget each year is. State and local government spending is $6.5 trillion a year. Do the math. 30 trillion. Our economy is 30 trillion. Federal government, 7 trillion. State and local government spending is 6.5 trillion. But some of that spending is federal money that has been transferred to the states and cities. So let's say the federal government makes up 23.3% of our entire economy. And let's say, conservatively speaking, anywhere between 15 to 18% of our GDP comes from state and local spending. So I've taken out a couple of trillion. That's federal dollars transferred to state and local. So when you add up federal spending, state spending, municipal spending, that is nearly 40% of our entire economy. What the federal government buys, what states and local governments buy, make up 40% of our economy. That is socialism, just not socialism for us. When almost half the economy is government spending, and then when you factor in government regulation, what we've got is a state-run economy, partially. But it's just not run for us. It's run for the rich. Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and every other rich billionaire in America owes their fortune entirely to government spending, as well as the government not spending on the Internal Revenue Service. This is not just about regulatory capture. Regulatory capture, putting a putz in to run the EPA to make certain, billionaires can't pollute the environment. This isn't about just about regulatory capture to make sure billionaires aren't fined for abusing their workers. This is also about government spending. There's a lot of money in Washington, D.C. When the Republicans and some Democrats say there's no money, what they mean is there's no money for you. Plenty of money to drop bombs on Yemen. Plenty of money to launch rockets into space for Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. Plenty of money in cloud services for Amazon, Microsoft. Now, Remember the control our president had yesterday over Jeff Bezos. Remember this. Trump didn't want Amazon listing the cost of tariffs, and Bezos buckled. Why? Because Trump could cancel all those government contracts. Billions and billions and billions and billions. The president has a lot of power. And I talked about this when Biden was president. I talked about something called debarment. D-E-B-A-R-M-E-N-T. Remember this word, debarment. It's not what they're trying to do with Pete Hegseth. They're not trying to debar him. Remember what debarment means. And next time we elect a Democratic president, remember the word debarment. Now, Biden used debarment with his bipartisan infrastructure bill and with the Inflation Reduction Act. He debarred any government contractor from receiving federal funding that came out of the bipartisan infrastructure bill or the Inflation Reduction Act if those government contractors refuse to pay either union or what are called prevailing livable wages. Now, if the federal government is about 24% of the economy, through debarment, you can change the way workers are treated. And as I pointed out on previous episodes, through debarment, I believe it will be challenged in the courts, but I believe the commander-in-chief can tell the manufacturers of AR-15s like Daniel Defense, you have a choice. You can either sell AR-15s to the Pentagon, or you can sell them to consumers. Make a choice. If you're selling AR-15s to consumers, which you have a right to do under the Second Amendment, but you can't sell to our military. If you're selling AR-15 assault weapons to the FBI, to our National Guard, to local police, you cannot sell to consumers. I'm not going to have you sell weapons to the people who are going to kill our soldiers, our FBI, and our police officers. So make a choice. You can sell either to consumers or to the government. Can't do both. That's called debarment. If we had a Supreme Court, which we don't, that would hold up. But somehow they would find that to be a violation of the Second Amendment. Somehow. I don't know how, but they would find a way for it to be a violation of the Second Amendment and the First Amendment and the Commerce Clause. There are no laws. There's only money, power, fear, and violence. We've learned that. Trump is president. There are no laws. There's only money, power, fear, and violence. Trump, right now, is debarring government contracts, threatening to debar government contracts. Let me put it this way. Amazon, Jeff Bezos, still refuses to obey the National Labor Relations Board. Starbucks still refuses to obey the National Labor Relations Board and engage in good faith collective bargaining with the unions. So, it is well within a president's right to debar any company that is in violation of the law. You could debar any corporation that owes taxes, whose CEO owes taxes. Okay? It is well within the power of a president as well as Congress to pass laws that debar corporations who don't reflect the values of the American people and who are in violation of labor laws, okay. So, now I want you to imagine a president, a Democratic president, who exerts this much power over corporate America, literally squeezing them for cash and political favors the way Trump does, okay? Imagine the power that Trump is using right now to squeeze corporations for cash and political favors. Imagine a president using the power of his office instead to force billionaires simply to obey the law by debarring them. Remember that Trump is squeezing corporations right now, and I guess it's legal. He's squeezing 60 Minutes, Amazon, CBS News, Facebook, Disney, ABC News, the Associated Press, the Des Moines Register, some pollsters. He's literally squeezing them for money to settle lawsuits against them. Goes right into his pocket. Or they donate to his inaugural ball. He's squeezing them to dial back anything remotely critical of him. You saw 60 Minutes Sunday night. But imagine a president who did all of that for the people instead of himself. Yes, I'm thinking of Bernie. If Bernie did any of that as president to improve the lives of 200 million people, well, he'd be called Evita Peron. He'd be called Huey Long. He'd be called Mussolini. Couldn't do it. Unless he had huge majorities in the House and Senate. Huge majorities of lawmakers who support our vision for America. But that requires a vast majority of us to wake up. And one of the most underreported stories right now are the crowds coming out to see Bernie and AOC. The American people are going to wake up and realize government is both the answer and the problem. Ronald Reagan declared government isn't the solution, it's the problem. No, government is the answer and the problem. It's the problem. Government is the problem when it's owned by billionaires, as it is right now. It's the solution when it forces those billionaires to answer to the people. When it requires the people just to do simple math and realize how they're getting screwed. There's 99% of us and 1% of them. 40% of the entire economy comes from the taxes we pay. And billionaires are only billionaires because they suck off our government's teat and they use the money they get from the government to hire accountants and lawyers. So we're the ones who pay taxes, not them. Math doesn't lie. I'm bad at math. Math doesn't lie, which is why Republicans and centrist Democrats try to confuse you. They don't go over the simple math. They throw around terms when it comes to the budget like discretionary and non-discretionary spending. Go F yourself. They'll make you feel stupid by talking about how the budget affects the bond market and interest rates. They'll talk about dynamic scoring of the budget versus static scoring. They invent terms and theories to hide simple math. 40% of our economy, 40% of our economy is government spending. The rich don't want government to get out of the way. They want it to get out of their way when they're being regulated. But they're more than happy to deal with the government when it comes time for government contracts. So, this government, this country, wasn't built for us. It was built for someone like Trump. It wasn't built for Bernie. It wasn't built for AOC. It wasn't built for Katie Porter. It wasn't built for Jasmine Crockett or Barbara Lee, the new mayor of Oakland. It was built for Trump. Our founding documents, our institutions are all designed to assist Trump in everything he's doing. So electing Bernie, AOC, Katie Porter, Jasmine Crockett, Barbara Lee, the entire system is rigged against a progressive who would switch the tables on the billionaires, wielding the same exact power Trump is, but for the people. The system will break anyone who attempts to do that. It's why some well-meaning left-of-center Democrats voted for Biden and not Bernie, because they felt that without a far left-of-center Democratic infrastructure in place in the House and the Senate, with Bernie as president, his own party would destroy him. He's not even a Democrat. He would be destroyed by Democrats. The system will break anyone who tries to help the people unless we send majorities to the House and the Senate. So, all right, I should wrap it up. I believe the answer isn't Marxism, capitalism, social, whatever you want to call it. I believe the answer is representative democracy and class consciousness. I believe in convincing millions of Americans that they're middle class or poor, that they're not going to win the lottery. They're never going to be millionaires. I believe in convincing Americans that they're middle class, lower middle class, and poor, and that it should be okay in our country to be middle class, lower middle class, poor. I believe it should be safe, that Americans have to believe it's safe, that it's not the mark of the beast if you're just getting by. That means a government that is not the problem, but the solution, a government that provides the basics, just the basics. Free and or affordable basics. Free if you're middle class lower middle class, or poor. No shame. We need to establish non-negotiable bottom lines. Fantastic public schools must be free for everyone. Public universities and public colleges should be free for everyone. Food should be free for anyone under the age of 18. If you're living in our country or visiting our country, food should be free. Not fancy food. Probably not even meat. Just plant-based food. Basic nutrition should be provided to anyone under the age of 18. No questions asked. Imagine if there were federally funded restaurants that are free, where you could hang out and eat bland food, no drinks, just water, no soda, no juice, not even any fruit. Fruit isn't so great for, maybe I'm wrong about fruit. Just the bare bones where you can go by and get some soup, some plant-based protein, hang out, and discuss how to improve your community. Free food. Everything is solved around the kitchen table. Free food for everybody, not fancy food. Free food. No questions asked. Health care, dental care, eye care, free for everyone in this country, citizen or non-citizen, especially non-citizens who work in food services. You don't want the people handling your food to have diarrhea. Our economy, write this down, is $30 trillion a year. So let's talk about free health care. The economy is $30 trillion a year. Americans spend $1.5 trillion per year on health insurance premiums. It's kind of funny. You know, if you're living in Europe, this is kind of funny. $1.5 trillion per year, not on health care, health insurance premiums. Just sending money to the health insurance companies. And then their co-pays, which add at least $500 billion. So Americans are spending $2 trillion that just goes to the health insurance companies. At least. So, how much does health care cost? Well, who provides health care? Doctors and hospitals. Every year, they bill $2.3 trillion, which means just health care for doctors and hospitals to pay salaries, to pay for operations, for medicine, $2.3 trillion a year. So if the government were to cut out United Healthcare, out of a $30 trillion economy, $1.5 to $2 trillion would not be going to health insurance companies. Just $2.3 trillion would be going to the doctors and the hospitals. $2.3 trillion instead of spending, $5-6 trillion a year? Because health insurance companies make it so expensive. We're spending $2.3 trillion a year, just paying the doctors directly, paying the hospitals directly from our tax dollars. And by the way, hospitals and doctors bill $2.3 trillion. That number's inflated because they know the health insurance companies aren't going to pay them what they charge. So that's why you end up, if you look at an itemized bill, a hospital will charge $50 for a single aspirin. Look, there's always going to be fraud in medicine. Doctors and hospitals are always going to overcharge. Even the government, they're going to overcharge. They overcharge Medicare. A lot of hospitals and doctors are dishonest. But health insurance companies, that's organized fraud. That's a whole other level of stealing from the American people. And the only reason the health insurance companies get away with it is because nobody is willing in this country to take them on. The Democrats won't do simple math with the voters because so many Democrats are in bed with the health insurance companies. It's simple addition and subtraction. If we had Democrats willing to do the math, like Bernie, we'd have a life expectancy that competes with the industrialized world. We're dying. We're dying here for profits. Childcare should be free. Childcare should be free. Not for-profit childcare. You know what for-profit childcare costs? And by the way, do you know who they hire? A lot of undocumented Americans, which I'm okay with, but they hire undocumented Americans to take care of your children because you can steal their wages. Childcare in America should be free. Starting at the age of 1, in all our public schools, you should be able to drop your 1-year-old off at your local public school, and you know, despite the guns in our country, that's the safest place they would be. I rather drop a 1-year-old kid off at a public school in America than somebody's house, somebody's for-profit rec room. Free. Well, I got a lot of notes here. Should I keep going? Okay, Bernie Sanders. What does he think about the tariffs? Well, throughout his career, he's opposed NAFTA. He's opposed most trade deals. For decades, he's been complaining about the loss of factory jobs to places like China, the race to the bottom when it comes to paying workers as little as possible by shipping their jobs to foreign sweatshops. But he doesn't support Trump's tariffs. He doesn't support this cluster bomb of 200 arbitrary trade deals that Trump is trying to make. Bernie supports selective tariffs that are designed with pinpoint accuracy to protect jobs and human rights. And if you listen to him, as he and AOC continue to play to packed crowds, record turnout for their Fighting Oligarchy tour, he says Trump's tariffs are inflationary. Because even though Trump lies and insists foreign countries are going to pay the tariffs, it's the American consumer paying those tariffs. And according to most economists, even with Trump suspending his tariffs until July, consumers will begin seeing a sharp rise in prices starting in May. Amazon already raising prices. That's why Trump had to get on the phone to threaten Bezos. So, even if these tariffs are permanently suspended, we will still see inflation. Greed. Corporations were able to raise prices during COVID once everyone became convinced that there were supply chain issues, even though the supply chain issues were temporary. Somehow, corporate America convinced us they were permanent. So corporations kept jacking up prices, even when Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, and Joe Biden solved the supply chain issue. So Biden, if you remember, spoke out against greedflation. Corporations will raise prices when they can convince enough consumers raw material costs more than they actually do. There are ways around this. Windfall profit tax. They did that with the oil companies in the 70s. There are ways to... It's a form of domestic tariffs. You're going to be greedy? Going to charge too much? We're going to tax your profits. So my prediction is we're going to see more greedflation, where corporations start claiming Trump's tariffs left them with no choice but to raise prices. Even if Trump's tariffs, if the freeze goes beyond July, which I think this freeze is going to remain in place. Nevertheless, I believe corporations, because they can get away with it, will raise prices, saying, don't blame us, blame the tariffs that aren't actually in effect. And then Trump will start flipping out. Gary Cohn served in the first Trump administration as director of the National Economic Council. He pointed out over the weekend that the inflation caused by these tariffs will primarily hurt poor people because 100% of their income is spent on food, clothing, and all the other basic necessities of life that are about to become way more expensive. Gary Cohn said rich people save their money. Poor people spend all of it. The more you spend, the more you're going to feel the inflation. Trump continues to lie. He's a pathological liar. He insists the world is kissing his ass, begging him to make a deal. But so far, the leader of China, Xi, refuses to still come to the phone. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter that Xi refuses to come to the phone. Trump says we're very close to a deal with Xi. The Chinese are saying, not true, not true. Trump says, I've made 200 deals already. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was asked about those 200 deals and said, well, I believe he's referring to sub-deals. Sub-deals. Get the 6-inch teriyaki chicken pro sub of the day, a small drink, and a side of chips, or 2 cookies for just $6.99. Those are the sub deals that Trump has negotiated. Scott Bessent has tried to get Xi on the phone, but the leader of China won't take his call. Asked on ABC's This Week about Trump and Xi talking, Bessent said, well, I don't know whether or not they're talking. But then he quickly added, quote, Trump and Xi Jinping have a very good relationship and a lot of respect for each other. Well, that's why Xi doesn't answer Trump's phone calls. Their relationship is so rock solid, they can finish each other's sentences. They don't need to talk on the phone. They can just negotiate telepathically. The Chinese government, however, as I said, denies any negotiations are taking place. There's word that Xi is using this as an opportunity to break the United States. Hey, Xi, just leave that to Trump. You don't, just take a break. You don't need to break us. Trump's doing a good job all by himself. There are some reports that China might lift some of its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. semiconductors. There's some talk. And of course, Trump is lifting some of the tariffs on automobiles because Tesla. Bessent praised Trump as the master negotiator. He said that Trump knows exactly what he's doing by announcing tariffs, freezing the tariffs, unfreezing some, unfreezing others, freezing more tariffs. And Bessent said, quote, in game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty. Well, in real life, it's called you're a moron. Strategic uncertainty. How about strategic stupidity? This is what you do when you don't know what you're doing. You talk about game theory and drop phrases like strategic uncertainty. Scott Bessent, this is another Yale graduate, by the way, explained, quote, in game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty, so you're not going to tell the person on the other side of the negotiation where you're going to end up. And nobody's better at creating this leverage than President Trump. Yes, Trump, the great negotiator. Like those peace talks with Putin, where before the talks even begin, Trump says, well, I'm already planning to lift economic sanctions, let you keep Crimea and all the territory in the Donbass region. I'm also agreeing that Ukraine can't join NATO or the EU. Okay, now let's negotiate. Is that the strategic uncertainty you're talking about, Scott Bessent? Strategic uncertainty. Trump is an imbecile. She is not returning your calls, Trump, because she knows you're an imbecile. No uncertainty, no strategic uncertainty there. She is strategically certain, Donald Trump, that you're an imbecile. Putin doesn't want to negotiate because he's strategically certain that Donald Trump is his bitch. Putin doesn't need to negotiate because his bitch, Donald Trump, is giving him everything he wants. So why not just keep fighting, especially since the Republicans won't be sending weapons to Ukraine anytime soon? Senator Ed Markey warning Trump's plan to give Russia what amounts to 30% of Ukraine will not be enough to satisfy Putin, who, Markey said, ultimately will try to take all of Ukraine. Well, of course he will. As you know, the Trump administration is getting very tired of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky's refusal to surrender. Don't you want peace, Vladimir Zelensky? Don't you want to make peace with the man who's ethnically cleansing the Donbass region of Ukrainians, kidnapping tens of thousands of Ukrainian children, erasing Ukrainian history in Crimea because he doesn't believe there's such a thing as the Ukrainian people? He believes they're Russian. Vladimir Zelensky, why don't you want to make peace? Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying, we just don't know what we're going to do about Zelensky. He's not interested in surrendering and permitting Putin to take all of Ukraine and commit further genocide. Zelensky obviously doesn't want to stop the killing in order for Putin to continue more of it. We don't know what we're going to do about Zelensky. Well, he didn't say that, but he implied. And he's warning, Rubio, our Secretary of State, is warning that this week is critical. And unless America sees a willingness from both sides for Ukraine to lose and give Putin everything he wants, then there's really nothing we can do. Our hands are tied. Rubio is kind of saying that he, Trump, the United States, we're about to walk away from the negotiations unless Zelensky agrees to stop negotiating. There can be no more negotiations if Zelensky insists on negotiating. Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2022, or according to Trump, Zelensky dragged Russian tanks into Ukraine in February of 2022. The last time both sides sat down to talk peace was in the spring of 2022. Since then, it's been a grinding war of attrition similar to World War I, where Russia takes some territory, Ukraine takes it back, then Russia takes it back again, and it never ends. So Putin did call for a 3-day truce that would start on May 8th until the 10th, so Russia could observe the 80th anniversary of Germany's defeat in World War II. A sad day for the Trump family. North Korea says 12,000 of its troops are now fighting alongside Russia in the war on Ukraine. North Korea state radio taking credit for Russia's latest victory in Kursk. That's part of Russia. It's Western Russia. Ukraine, in August of last year, seized much of Kursk, which Russia then reclaimed last month thanks to some help from North Korean soldiers. Donald Trump, in open defiance of Europe, saying he's prepared to recognize Crimea as Russian territory. Crimea was seized by Russia in 2014, and the United States is about to defy the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, NATO, and the EU by recognizing Crimea officially as Russian territory. Now, only 21 countries recognize Crimea as Russian territory, and these are among the heavy hitters. The Taliban, Belarus, Iran, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, North Korea, Nicaragua, Serbia, Syria, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. So when it comes to Ukraine, Trump's on the same side as Venezuela, which we're at war with. He invoked the Alien Enemies Act because he says we've been invaded by Venezuela, but when it comes to Ukraine and Crimea being Russian territory, we're on the same side as our mortal enemy, Venezuela. Somebody should tell Venezuela that we're at war with them. I think that's only polite. So, despite Vladimir Zelensky repeatedly saying throughout the year that Crimea is a non-negotiable, we will not cede it to Russia, Trump said yesterday, I believe Zelensky is ready to give up Crimea. Never said that. Trump thinks if I put words in Zelensky's mouth, he's going to think, did I say I'm going to give up Crimea? Trump just said I did. And he always tells the truth, so I guess I said it. Zelensky admits that Ukraine lacks the weapons right now to take Crimea back from Russia. And as I suggested on the last show, this is why Trump says, I'm recognizing Crimea as Russian territory. You can't win. And that is the Trump doctrine. The Trump doctrine is might makes right. Whoever is the strongest can take whatever they want. Russia took Crimea. You don't have the weapons to take it back. Now it's Russia that owns it. Might makes right. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov appeared on CBS News and said Russia is not negotiating Crimea. We're not giving it back. After Putin launched a major offensive on Kyiv last week, killing civilians. Trump pretended he was worried Putin was stringing him along and really didn't want peace. Remember that? Trump pretending he believed it might be time for economic sanctions against Putin, contradicting all his previous statements this year, written by Putin, where Trump proclaims, I'm prepared to lift economic sanctions going all the way back to the Obama administration as an incentive to get Putin to the surrender table. But Trump now pretending to hint maybe the answer is more economic sanctions. Trump wants us to believe he's keeping an open mind when in fact that mind is being kept by Putin. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calling on more, not fewer, sanctions against Russia this week. And now Iowa Republican Senator Chuck Grassley accusing Putin of playing America for a patsy. Chuck Grassley now agreeing with Schumer that the time has come for more economic sanctions on Russia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying he opposes more economic sanctions because it would signal to Putin that the United States has no interest in negotiating a peace settlement. Well, they don't. You want to negotiate a surrender. According to Foreign Affairs magazine, Pope Francis opposed the invasion of Ukraine, but he also opposed economic sanctions on Russia, saying economic sanctions only punish the most vulnerable. Foreign Affairs writes the Pope said that while the invasion of Ukraine was wrong, the West is partly to blame by encouraging NATO, quote, to bark at Russia's door, unquote. Pope Francis said Western expansion made Putin jumpy. The Pope added that the people who want this war the most are the arms merchants. Well, Putin has gone on record saying Ukraine isn't a real country. And this is why his soldiers have been erasing any memory of Ukrainian history inside museums, libraries, and any government buildings Russian soldiers seize. Russia is also kidnapping Ukrainian children from the Donbas region, taking them back to orphanages in Moscow where they are given to Russian-speaking parents. It is estimated that at least 20,000 Ukrainian children have been sent into what amounts to be Russian re-education camps, where these children get their Ukrainian identity erased, and then they are handed over to their new Russian parents. This is a war crime designated to terrorize at first and then eliminate the Ukrainian people in the Donbas region. One of the first things Trump did upon returning to office this year is shut down funding for a United States-backed NGO called Ukraine Conflict Observatory, which is part of Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab. The Ukraine Conflict Observatory tracks and attempts to maintain a database of children who have been abducted by Russian soldiers. They maintain a database of Ukrainian children abducted by Russian soldiers. Well, Trump, one of the first things he did when he returned to the Oval Office is he defunded the Ukraine Conflict Observatory, and he was criticized. So Marco Rubio announced it would restore some of the funding, just enough money for it to get shut down, but so it could transfer its database to Europol, which serves as the European Union's top law enforcement agency. So he shut down Yale University's Ukraine Conflict Observatory, gave them just enough money so they could transfer their database to the EU. Well, of course, after speaking with Zelensky before the Pope's funeral, Trump lied and promised Zelensky that, of course, the United States will look into these missing kids. So there's what Trump says and what he does. There already was an organization keeping a database of these kidnapped Ukrainian children, but Trump essentially shut it down. But all of a sudden now he claims he's asked the Russians to return all the Ukrainian kids they absconded with. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, telling CBS News, Trump never asked Putin or him about the thousands of missing Ukrainian children. Kidnapped children. He calls them missing. They've been kidnapped. Lavrov said Russia doesn't kidnap children. He said during wars, kids will often wander away from their parents, and that Russia is keeping some Ukrainian children in orphanages until they can be reunited with their parents. Trump and the Republicans doing nothing about these Ukrainian children, which I find surprising because we all know how much MAGA Republicans care about children. They love children. They do. It's all about the kids if you're a Republican. Well, on our last show, I told you about 3 American citizens deported by ICE. One was age 2, another one was 4 years old, the other was 7. I told you the 4-year-old was suffering from stage 4 cancer and was deported without their medication or any advice from the doctor. Again, those were 3 children who were American citizens born here in the United States. Their parents were not born here in the United States. They were performing routine check-ins with immigration, obeying the law, participating in the process. But the cowards from ICE decided to detain and deport them because Trump is ashamed by how few migrants he's actually deporting. The ACLU now reporting that the New Orleans ICE field office also deported a pregnant mother. But much like the missile strikes in Yemen, killing innocent women and children, Trump wants us to know innocent women and children are being deported. He wants us to know American children with cancer are being deported. He's proud that this is going on because that makes it seem like he's really cracking down on migrants. It makes him sound tougher than he actually is because the numbers just aren't there. And he's upset about the numbers. During Trump's first 100 days, he's now deported fewer migrants than Joe Biden did during the same exact period a year ago. So just like with the Houthis, Trump is resorting to terror. That's exactly what terrorism is. Terrorism is a public display of violence to scare large groups of people, especially those completely untouched by the violence. That's why the airstrikes in Yemen kill innocent women and children. That's why he's deporting innocent women and children, a kid with cancer, a pregnant mother. It's to terrorize communities. 3,000 people died on 9/11, but 350 million Americans were terrorized that day. That's what terrorism is. It's not the numbers. It's the terror. A federal judge appointed by President Trump just announced he would hold hearings in mid-May, getting to the bottom of these American children getting deported. And this judge accusing ICE of providing none of these families due process. That's the idea. That's why they're doing it. The father of the 2-year-old American citizen who was deported filed a lawsuit last Thursday claiming he attempted to communicate with the child's mother who was being deported. ICE insists the mother said, if you're going to deport me, I want to take my child with me. But the father of the child said he wasn't allowed to discuss it with the mother. He kept telling ICE that that 2-year-old child is an American citizen. They weren't interested. All this as the father could hear his child crying and screaming in the background as he talked on the phone with that ICE field office. The father's sister-in-law, also an American citizen, tried to tell ICE, I'll take the child. But ICE wouldn't talk to her. And lawyers are now saying that ICE warned the father, do not come down here. This is what they said to him over the phone. Do not come down here. If you try to talk to us personally, we will detain and deport you as well. Now, in the past, we would say, well, the American people won't stand for this. Trump is saying, this is going exactly the way I planned it. This is terrorism. The American people may or may not stand for this. But a lot of people are scared. That's the idea. As I said, Trump is failing to keep up with Biden's numbers. So public displays of terror, make his deportation program appear way more voluminous than it actually is. Look at those people. And Trump's border czar, as Trump would say, is straight out of Central Casting. Tom Homan, Trump's border czar. He looks and sounds like the kind of guy who would torture 4-year-old American citizens suffering from stage 4 cancer. Tom Homan's job is to talk tough, never show mercy, because this isn't about government policy. It's not about solving a problem. There is no problem. This is about sadism. This is about satisfying the bloodlust of MAGA Republicans. So it's not the quantity of the deportations, it's the quality of the deportations, the horribleness of it all. The more savage, the better. Appearing at an early morning White House press conference to field questions, Homan said, we did nothing wrong. If a mother, he said, enters this country illegally and then gives birth to a child, and that child is now an American citizen, and they both end up getting deported, quote, that's on her. That's not on this administration, unquote. Homan said the mother knew what she was doing, and it was her choice to have that baby in the United States. Yes, it was also the mother's choice to live in a country torn apart by narco-terrorists and gangs. right? It was her choice to enter America, he says, illegally. He said, Homan said, giving birth to a U.S. citizen is not a get-out-of-jail-free card and doesn't grant immunity from U.S. laws. So, a couple of things about this. We're talking about a woman. We're talking about a child. These are not gang members. These are not criminals. Our borders are porous because we need these people to work in hospitals, daycare centers, to do home care, to work in restaurants, and of course, to work in our agricultural sector. So despite all those ads Kristi Noem cuts telling migrants, stay out, these people are, in fact, very much welcome into our country, even now, because without these people, our economy collapses, and there's nobody to care for grandma. There's nobody to handle our food or work at our daycare centers. And this is really important. And this is the danger of having so many stupid people living in the United States. So this is really important. It is not a crime to be in the United States without documentation. It is not a crime. I feel like repeating this 100 times. It is not a crime to be in the United States without documentation. Now, if you're trying to sneak into the country and they get you, they can send you back. But if you make it in here, it is not a crime. It is a civil offense. All the children who were American citizens that were detained and deported because their parents were performing routine check-ins at immigration centers, the parents were not illegal. They weren't undocumented. They were following the law. They were saying, hey, I'm here. We're trying to stay here. We want to become citizens. We're doing everything you told us to do. We have documents. We're doing our check-in. We're not hiding from you. Nobody is a criminal. It's not a criminal offense to be in the country without documentation. It's a civil offense. And if you're showing up for a routine immigration check-in, you don't get detained and you don't get deported unless Donald Trump is president. These are legally documented immigrants, women and children and men with zero criminal records, as well as U.S. citizens being deported. But because Trump is ashamed that Joe Biden deported more migrants than he did, ICE is grabbing anyone who isn't a real physical threat to the cowards who work for ICE. Because the last thing the cowards who work for ICE want is a physical altercation or a shootout. Now, I want you to listen to me very carefully, and I want you to go online. Has there been one shootout with any of these so-called criminal terrorists? I keep hearing about how they arrested these MS-13 members. Tren de Agua, they're waging war. Tren de Aragua, according to Donald Trump, when he invoked the Alien Enemies Act, said, we are being invaded by Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, sent, according to Trump in his executive order, said Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, sent Tren de Aragua terrorists, gang members into America to rape, to murder, to kill. He says these are the most dangerous people in the world. Has there been one shootout between ICE and any of these terrorists waging war in the United States? If these people are the worst of the worst, waging war on the United States, they all seem to be going pretty peacefully. And to those ICE fans, putting up zero fight when ICE comes for them, maybe you need to tell them they're terrorists. Maybe Trump didn't tell them that they're terrorists or waging war on America. As I said, ICE, cowards. The last thing they want to do is go for those really tough gang members. Hey, there's a 4-year-old with cancer, stage 4 cancer. That sounds safe. There's a pregnant mother. Let's get her. Send me a story. Let's, if you can find one story, send it to me, of ICE agents rounding up MS-13 and Tren de Aragua gang members who were the gang members are like the Symbionese Liberation Army, you know, where there's even David Koresh put up a fight. Where are the shootouts with these? We're told we're at war. I thought war means shooting at people. They're the worst of the worst. These mothers, please, if you can find one example of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua not going peacefully, not forget guns, just a physical altercation with ICE, not running away. I'm talking according to Trump, these are warriors. If you can find one example of a pitched battle between MS-13 and ICE or Tren de Aragua and ICE, please, I need to know. These mothers, their American children, weren't breaking the law, but they were easy targets for the cowards from ICE, and they got sent back to Honduras. This is just cowardice. And then Tom Homan once again defended family separation. Now, he invented with Stephen Miller during the first Trump administration the family separation policy. Now, there was a father not able to see his 2-year-old. And Homan, and he does this all the time, he compares it to when a parent is separated from their child when the parent is sent off to prison. I've heard him say this all the time. Homan says, we're not separating families. In America, when we send people to prison, their families don't go with them. And if you're stupid, you go, oh, okay. Well, the immigrants, first of all, are not prisoners. and they're not criminals. They're not breaking the law. And it's the child being carted off, not the parents. You send the mother or the father to prison in America, not the child. Although another 4 years of Trump, who knows? Get it through your thick skull, America. Being in this country without the proper documentation is not a criminal offense. It is a civil offense. No jail time, because our nation's business model is undocumented workers. Our economy collapses without these people. So what's going on right now is we terrorize, not we, Trump, terrorize just enough to make it look like Trump's cleaning out the country. He's not, because he can't. He can't. He can just commit acts of terror, because none of this is real. It's not real. I've been telling you this for years. It's only real for the families. It's real for the people who are being deported and tortured. It's not real. It's not a real problem. This is a complete waste of law enforcement. It's a waste of money and time and oxygen. It's not a problem. It's a non-existent crisis, just an excuse for sadism. And by the way, Trump wants it both ways. He says we need to deport 14 million migrants because they're poisoning our country. But at the same time now, he's claiming this is now the safest border in American history. Tom Homan said it on Monday. He said this is now the most secure border in the history of our nation. Well, then I guess we don't need a border czar, do we? Problem solved, right? If this is now the most secure border in our nation's history, I guess we don't need to start transferring billions of tax dollars to Geo Group and CoreCivic, our country's largest for-profit private prison corporations that donated millions to Trump last year. They're expecting billions of dollars in government contracts to build more concentration camps, for-profit concentration camps. Which one is it? What is it, the most secure border in American history? Or do we have to round up 14 million undocumented? They're documented. They have documents. 14 million people of color. Well, what is it? What's the answer? It's a border crisis when Trump needs it to be a border crisis, and it's the most secure border in American history when he needs it to be the most secure border in American history. Trump only succeeds when the number of stupid people in our country outnumbers those who still possess critical thinking. Trump and the Republicans govern. They win votes through anecdotal evidence, because they can't work. You can't run on the numbers, so you run on anecdotal evidence. It doesn't matter if violent crime dropped during the Biden administration. Talk about Laken Riley. Just bring up anecdotal evidence. Doesn't matter if border crossings reached a 5-year low by the time Trump returned to office. You deport American citizens, send innocent fathers of U.S. citizens to that prison in El Salvador, calling him a terrorist. That's the anecdotal evidence Trump relies upon. So stupid people are convinced he's cracking down on migrants, even though he's not. The same way he relied on anecdotal evidence that there's a problem with violent immigrants, even though there's not. See, math doesn't lie. Trump and Republicans do. Migrants are less violent, less likely to commit a crime than American citizens. That's math. Border crossings began dropping in 2024 and are now at a 10-year low. Math. Migrants pay more in taxes than they take from the government. Math. Trump can't govern, can't win elections using math, so use anecdotal evidence. Find that migrant who got behind the wheel of a car drunk and ended up killing 3 people. And from that single shred of anecdotal evidence, millions of stupid Americans are convinced we're being invaded by Venezuela. Likewise, deport an American citizen who's 4 years old and suffering from stage 4 cancer. And from that one anecdote, stupid Americans are led to believe Trump is tough. He's cleaning up. No. Biden deported more migrants during the same period last year than Trump is doing now. Anecdotal evidence, because math doesn't lie. It's why our director of Homeland Security, this block of mascara and foundation in a push-up bra, wrote in her book about killing her puppy, Cricket. It wasn't revealed that she killed her puppy. She bragged about killing her puppy in her book. Why? To prove I'm presidential material. I can make the tough decisions like killing Cricket, our family puppy. PETA didn't expose this. This imbecile in a push-up bra bragged about it. Because if I can kill a puppy, I can drop bombs on innocent women and children in Yemen. There is reporting in Atlantic Magazine today that the Trump administration knew ICE blew it when it deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And at first, the Trump administration started to make plans to bring him home. But then, when it became a national embarrassment, Trump ordered everyone to lead with defiance. To use Garcia's gross injustice in order to test what the courts will allow Trump to get away with, in order to terrorize the migrant community, in order to convince hardcore MAGA Republicans that Trump is tough. By keeping Garcia in that prison, it papers over the raw numbers. It papers over the math that Trump isn't deporting as many people as he promised. Far from it. Not even as many as Biden. So he sees Garcia languishing in that El Salvadoran prison. He sees it as a gift that distracts attention away from how he's failing to deport the 14 million he promised he would. With MAGA Republicans, it's more important to sound tough than to be tough. It's easier to deport a 4-year-old American citizen with stage 4 cancer than an actual gangbanger, and you get more bang for your buck deporting a kid with cancer. It's so horrible. It's so horrible. It's all anybody could talk about. Well, I guess Trump is tough. He's tough. Same way The head of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, is tough. She killed a puppy. These are tough people. The more horrible, the more it works to Trump's advantage. That's why White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said, we're not even trying to bring Garcia home, despite the Supreme Court basically ordering the Trump administration to bring him home. Leavitt, despite all evidence to the contrary, still calling Garcia a designated foreign terrorist. Trump gave an interview on ABC News before his Michigan rally and said Garcia had MS-13 tattoos, and Moran, the reporter who interviewed him, said those were doctored, those were proven to be photoshopped. And Trump just continued to lie because it doesn't matter what the truth is. President Trump's borders are. Tom Homan also saying on Monday, Garcia is a terrorist. It's not. 2 weeks ago, Homan said ICE made a mistake, but now the official Trump party line is call him a terrorist, defy the Supreme Court, defy reality. Defy reality, because that's what fascists do. There are reports of arrests in 3 states of American citizens pretending to be ICE agents. That's what's going on. Regular Americans now are terrorizing migrant communities by pretending to work for ICE, which is pretty easy to do because they're all cowards. How tough is it to work for ICE? Are there any shootouts with these gang members? If you find any evidence of ICE having trouble rounding up these so-called terrorists, please send me the information. Big show of force over the weekend. The second man believed to have stolen Homeland Security Director Kristi Noem's Gucci bag, arrested by ICE in Miami, Florida on Sunday. The suspect is reportedly an undocumented immigrant from Chile. You know what? If I were Kristi Noem, if I were Corey Lewandowski, I would tell Kristi Noem to claim it was a massive sting operation, that she left the Gucci bag underneath her chair as part of a sting operation to get this guy, because she should be fired. She should be fired for the head of Homeland Security gets her bag stolen. 800 immigrants arrested over a 4-day period in Florida as ICE and state police conducted joint raids. Publicity stunts, busy work. I played you the clip of the Republican last year meeting with Hispanic leaders on behalf of farmers, telling the Hispanic leaders, tell your people this is just for show. It's just political. Come to Florida and work and pick our tomatoes and our oranges. What we're doing is just for show. He's on tape saying that I played you the tape. The Fort Myers, Florida City Council voted earlier this year not to cooperate with ICE. But then they agreed to cooperate on this big crackdown after Florida's Attorney General sent them a warning. Florida law says the mayor and city council will be removed from office if they fail to assist the federal government in cracking down on migrants. A woman married to a member of the United States Coast Guard stationed in Key West, Florida, was arrested, detained, after it was determined her work visa had expired. The woman was undergoing a security screening in order to live on the naval base when the computer indicated her visa had expired. Doesn't matter that she's married to a member of our Coast Guard, that she has no arrest record. Put her in a detention center because there's money to be made by putting her in a for-profit detention center. At least a dozen active duty soldiers stationed at Fort Carson were arrested in Colorado Springs, Colorado, early Sunday morning after ICE conducted a high-profile raid of an after-hours club. They rounded up nearly 100 people, more than a dozen of whom were active duty soldiers. 300 law enforcement officials from 10 federal agencies, including the local police and the DEA, assisted ICE on this roundup. Police say they seized guns, cocaine, meth, and they have reason to believe prostitution was taking place. The government claiming, go big here, we can look at the people they arrested. Look how tough they are. The government claiming among those taken in were Venezuelan and MS-13 gang members. Sure they were. Gang members. No reports of anybody putting up a fight. I mean, they seized guns? Was there a shootout? I mean, these guys are the worst of the worst. They're MS-13. They're Tren de Aragua. No reports of war. But 10 agencies, 300 law enforcement officials from 10 federal agencies to arrest 100 people, more than a dozen of whom were active duty soldiers. So 300 law enforcement officials to arrest 75 people. That's more than 3 law enforcement officials for each so-called migrant. I feel safe. Again, I've scoured the internet. I'm looking. If you can find one example of a well-documented example of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua gang members physically, forcefully putting up a fight as ICE arrests them, I would love to see it. How is this a war? How is this an invasion by Venezuelan gang members if I can't find one example of ICE finding resistance when they arrest these so-called terrorists? Again, if you can find any evidence, please send it to me. A new poll shows 53% of Americans disapprove of Trump's immigration policy. 80% of Americans, according to this new poll, believe immigrants with visas and green cards should receive due process before being deported. A Washington Post ABC poll has Trump's approval rating down to 39%. CNN puts him at 41%. This is the worst performance after 100 days for any modern American president. He's even doing worse than he did the first 100 days of his first term. A new PRRI poll of 5,000 Americans shows 52% of Americans believe President Trump is a dangerous dictator whose power should be limited before he destroys American democracy. Trump, fuming over these polls, and who's to blame? Well, according to Trump, the pollsters, who he calls sick criminals. In the past year, he has said the pollster should be prosecuted for election fraud. Meanwhile, Trump is already suing the Des Moines Register and its former pollster, Jay Ann Selzer, after they came out with a survey right before the November election showing Kamala Harris winning Iowa. Well, she didn't, and Jay Ann Selzer quit. Trump is suing her. So, Simple math. Joe Biden deported 5 million migrants in his 4 years as president. Trump, during his 4 years, deported fewer than 1 million. Why was Obama the deporter in chief? Because they were worried that the Republicans would accuse them of being weak on immigration. No matter what you do, the Republicans are going to accuse you of being weak on immigration. You cannot win the immigration debate unless you change the subject. The American people want to be good, but they need leaders to help them be good. Bobby Kennedy, in the last year of his life, was appealing to the voters' better angels. He would visit Appalachia. He would remind us that we have to take care of our most vulnerable. Joe Biden and Obama didn't want to crack down on immigration. They were trying. They thought, well, if we deport just enough, then the Republicans will stop beating up on us. No, they're going to beat up on you no matter what. So you've got to teach the American people the way Roosevelt did with fireside chats, not to be self-serving here, but the way I do. Simple math, explaining why we need these people. The president should have gone to the border. President Biden should have gone to the border and showed the women and the children and interviewed them and have them tell their stories and appeal to the goodness that's still here in our country. There's a migrant crisis, an immigration crisis, because there's a leadership crisis. We don't have presidents, we don't have Democratic leaders who are explaining that there are thousands of communities desperate for these migrants. We have ghost towns like Springfield, Ohio, which brought in those Haitian migrants here on temporary protected legal status. Republicans brought those Haitians into Springfield, Ohio, and Trump and J.D. Vance said, oh, they're eating cats and dogs. You need a Democratic Party that's willing to teach, to do the math. Change the conversation about immigration. It's not about cracking down on immigration. It's about explaining to the American people we're a nation of immigrants. We're losing our population. You keep hearing Mike Johnson and J.D. Vance talking about how we have to produce more people, have more. They want white people to reproduce. They don't want to bring in the migrants. All right. Long show. I apologize. I had to get a lot of stuff out of the way. Jesus, this was a long show. Sorry. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. I forgot to say hello again. Please like this episode. Please share it. Please subscribe to the channel, my newsletter. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. If you work for ICE, you're worthless and you're a coward. And if anybody can find any evidence of MS-13 or Tren de Aragua putting up a fight when they're arrested, we don't even know if they are MS-13 or Tren de Aragua. But Donald Trump says we're at war with Tren de Aragua. Where's the battle? They went peacefully in Colorado the other night. If they were, in fact, MS-13 or Tren de Aragua. Leave a comment. Thank you. It has been a horrible 100 days. Let's make the next 100 days horrible for Donald Trump.